Ask that all of you just remain here the entire time so there's no disruption. It should last about 1 hour. And we also ask that right now you double check and make sure your phones are silenced or do not disturb. And we'll again begin in just about 2 or 3 minutes. So if there is a seat beside you, and try to squeeze in right there.
You may be seated. Welcome to the oral of Jake Englestad. Jake was my senior assistant this year in American History and in Great Books 3. And this morning he's going to present his thesis and then sit down and answer some questions asked by myself. My name is Brandon Schumann. This is Chase Acuff and then Jeff Patterson. Thank you for joining us here in person and online. The way this format is going to work is after Jake speaks and we do a round of questions, we'll have a couple of questions from the virtual audience that we'll feed into Jake, and then we'll do one more round to be done in about an hour. So I'll pray and then let Jake begin. Heavenly Father God, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you so much for the opportunity to gather together and listen to the wisdom of this young man. I pray that you would be blessed and glorified in the things that he has to say, and that we can learn more about you and about him in your world. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Picture yourself on a boat controlling the sails during a storm. It's all about control. Control the sails too little and you're deemed to drift the entire journey, never reaching your final destination. Control the sails too much, and again, you'll never reach your final destination, but this time, you've spent your entire journey trying to control the winds. Now, in this parable, the things that you cannot control are the winds. These are the unforeseen circumstances, sometimes changing, sometimes staying constant. The way that you handle the boat is this idea of controlling your life, and the best means of this control is this idea of Stoicism. Stoicism is an ancient philosophy that encourages people to strive for a better life by focusing on what the situation is rather than what it could be. Marcus Aurelius, a famous philosopher and the forefather of Stoicism, once described it as having power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. For my purposes, I'll be defining Stoicism as having poise and the importance of having accurate perspective when analyzing one's situation. Stoicism can be summed up in 2 parts. The first part is having control over your emotions and knowing that you can control your actions. And the second is learning to even enjoy the storm sometimes, the trials that we find in life. Stoicism isn't about controlling the circumstances. That's impossible. It's about how we overcome and deal with them. If you don't get into the school of your dreams, you weren't meant to be there. If If you break your leg sliding into third base, don't give up on baseball. In situations like this, it's easy to be overcome with emotion. These are the things that we must know that we can't control. Stoics strive to find their identity in Christ and consider their values when moving on from such circumstances. Stoicism empowers us to weather the storm and make it to our destination intact. Now, a common misconception about Stoicism is that it tells people to suppress their emotions, to go through life and never feel a thing. While this misconception is not only inaccurate, it doesn't make sense. True Stoics need to exercise the virtue of temperance. Temperance is the virtue of practicing everything in moderation. Said another way, it's giving everything its proper place. This includes feelings and emotions. This means that Stoics are not only true to themselves in how they feel, but they make sure that they are controlling their actions and how they can go through them. A great example of this is in Shakespeare's Scottish play. Malcolm tells Macduff to dispute the murder of his family by taking it like a man. Now, Macduff responds the very next line with, "I shall do so, but first I must feel it like a man." Stoicism teaches us that emotions are valid, but they cannot be allowed to control your life. You have to have control over the sails. Being a Stoic is a way to enjoy life by appreciating what's around you and discovering what makes you appreciate it so much. When we move with this perspective, we position ourselves to get the most out of life, and more astonishingly, we can even learn to enjoy the storm, while still navigating to our destination. The first principle of Stoicism is that a Stoic must know how to handle adversity by only controlling what they can control. Now, whenever a Stoic is faced with a disagreeable situation, they don't fixate on external factors or things that they can't control. They take a more inward approach. Let me explain. According to Plato, each of us is a soul. In his famous work, The Republic, which we read twice at MCA in Great Books 1, and again as a senior in Advanced Lit, Plato teaches that the soul has three parts: the mind with its stream of thoughts, the heart with its emotions, and the appetites with its desires. Each of these three parts of the soul has a corresponding virtue that helps it fulfill its proper function. Wisdom is the virtue of the mind. This is the ability that helps us navigate through complex situations and helps us act logically to find a way through the situation. Courage is the virtue of the spirit. Courage is the virtue that enables us to do difficult things in our life. The famous philosopher Seneca even said one time, "Even to live is an act of courage." This is the definition of courage that Stoics should embody. Difficult is in the eye of the beholder. Temperance is the virtue of the appetitive. Again, temperance is the idea of doing everything in moderation. Every action we make is driven by one of these three parts of the soul with their corresponding virtues. Stoics need to use all three in order to seek harmony within their soul and have perfect balance. Another major tenet of Stoicism is that Stoics are overcomers. They overcome their circumstances. They are not enslaved by them. And they are not trapped as a victim. You could almost say in a sense that Stoics are masters of their own fate. In Rhetoric 1, I read Servant Leadership by David Kuhnert. Kuhnert had this to say when concerning the victim versus the overcomer. When we are hit with emotions or bad situations, we immediately make it all about me. The bad things are happening and they point inwardly towards me. Circumstances are happening towards me. We need to slow our emotions down and realize that we have a choice. We always have a choice. To illustrate this, Czier describes two circles. The non-Stoic circle is what he describes as the victim circle. A victim is someone who views him or herself at the center of all their circumstances and places their happiness on the external factors around them, the quality of their circumstances. Stoics should strive to be in the overcomer circle. The overcomer or Stoic circle is meaning that we make a choice to decide how we're going to handle ourselves in these types of situations. This is one of the very few things that we can control in life. By being in control of your emotions and your actions, you set yourself up for success. It's easy to be down in the dumps when situations are less than ideal, but if we can learn to navigate through them quickly and easily, it's how we perceive them that empowers us to make the most of them and enjoy what we truly love about them. I experienced this idea just in the last year in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many senior-related activities were being canceled or postponed. One of these being the famous high school retreat. Now, when I first heard about high school retreat being canceled, I immediately decided to just start complaining, and I didn't really want to go anymore. But it wasn't fair. Why should I have to do this? Other senior classes are going to have their retreat. Why can't I? What gives? When I realized that I was complaining about this, I decided to just stop. I decided to talk with my class and figure out what I can enjoy the most about retreat, the people you share it with. This aspect was not taken away at all. And I think as a senior class, we chose to enjoy what we most like about retreat. We chose to channel our inner Stoic and be present in the overcomer circle, and not be a product of our circumstances. If we chose to stay in the victim circle, we would have been robbed of one of the last precious moments that our senior class would spend together. This idea is also present in the great life of another Stoic. His name was Stuart Scott. Scott was a famous sportscaster for ESPN, and he lived a very inspiring life that touched the lives of many sports fans. He was diagnosed with appendix cancer in 2007. 8 long years later, his battle with cancer ended when he died in January of 2015. Before his death, he gave a speech when he accepted the Jimmy V Award during the 2014 ESPYs. The most important line of his speech is when he talked about his battle with cancer, and it's quoted as, "When you die, this does not mean that you lose to cancer. You beat cancer by how you live, why you live, and the manner in which you live." Stuart Scott had a very touching life story. It would have been so easy for him to just roll over and say, "Well, I had a good life, I had a good run." Or just to curse his bad luck and become apathetic. Instead, despite the mortal circumstances he faced, he decided to be a Stoic, channel his inner harmony, and navigate through the situation. This is what Stoicism is all about, weathering the storm and finding peace in the ever-changing winds. Now, because Stoicism is largely based on inward emotions and obsessing on perspectives, wouldn't being defined by your emotions and taking a more romantic approach to life be the natural outcome of such a lifestyle? A romanticist is defined as someone who is obsessed with their feelings so much that they are oblivious to the realities around them. The Stoic and the Romantic both have an appreciation for their emotions and understand the importance of them. Both also understand that how a change in perspective can also change the situation. So, with all these questions in mind, how does a vigilant Stoic avoid becoming an accidental Romantic? To answer these questions, I interviewed Dr. Brendan Cross, who has a PhD in English, Humanities, and Philosophy. Dr. Cross has been teaching at Midland College for numerous years and had this to add my topic. A desire to control oneself can become an obsession. The good things can turn into bad things if left unchecked. Humans have a way of kind of lying to themselves to make their situation seem more ideal in their own eyes. We should remember that we need to curb our emotions and keep a healthy relationship towards them. To fully understand the dangers of emotion, I'd like to look at the story of Icarus. Icarus and his father were trapped on an island. Icarus and his father were trapped on an island where they had to employ wings made of wax in order to escape. Icarus warned his father of first not flying too close to the sun, and again, not flying too low. When they first escaped the island, Icarus flew too close to the sun, and his wax wings melted, where he plummeted to the sea and died. Emotional ambitions are sort of like the sun in this parable. It has such a strong gravity that it starts constantly pulling you towards its orbit. The closer you get, the more its heat starts to fill you with warmth and energy. But get too close and you'll reach the point that you start getting pulled in so deeply that you cannot escape any longer. Stoics should remember how to use everything in moderation and finding a balance upon how to express emotions. This brings me to my third principle, enjoying the storm. Now, I've talked about enjoying the storm, and all of you just nodded your head like this. This means finding peace in the things that you cannot control whatsoever. In James chapter 1:1-4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything." James calls us to try and find the troubles that we face in life because we're going to face so many of them. I believe that this is one of two ways to handle the storm. The other can be summarized by this quote: "Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, it's about learning to dance in the rain." This is a great quote, and it utilizes how we can get through certain situations. While it is a great quote, it isn't completely valid in my eyes. In some circumstances, it may be impossible to dance in the rain. If something or someone is near and dear to our hearts and is suddenly taken away, it can be incredibly disheartening to get through it. In the case of Macbeth that we discussed earlier, he is choosing to weather the storm because of the severity of the situation. I feel that it can take more energy to try and find a good thing in an inherently bad situation, rather than just trying to overcome it and weather the storm. However, in both circumstances, Stoics are in control of their emotions and actions. We can't do this on our own, however. We need God's help to evaluate what is near and dear to our hearts. King Solomon says that there is a time and a place for everything, and that includes emotion. When the storm seems unbearable and we feel like we can't go on, we must channel our inner Stoic, grab the sails, and with God's help, weather the storm and make it to shore. Stoicism isn't easy by any stretch. It requires courage to take risks, it requires wisdom to pursue its best, and it requires temperance to know when and how to go about it. Only when we check these three boxes we can begin our journey towards inner harmony within ourselves. Stoicism also teaches us that we must have a healthy relationship with our emotions, not suppressing them, yet not letting them take over. Whether you're weathering a storm or dancing in the rain, Stoics need to be overcomers. Whether you're fighting life-threatening diseases like Stuart Scott, or just simply being overwhelmed by everyday life. You need to find the sickness in your life and overcome it by how you live, why you live, and the manner in which you live. Thank you.
Great job, Jake. Okay, so our traditional first question for seniors is, what are your plans for next year?
My plans for next year, I intend to pursue a degree in musical theater and performing arts at the University of Utah.
You're going to do acting.
Yeah, I hate money.
Well, there's always a career in Stoicism. So.
Yeah.
So what led you to your topic of Stoicism? What led you to do your oral over Stoicism?
I think it was a combined effort of being in the COVID-19 and having a lot of things canceled, and I feel like I was just constantly stuck in a cycle of getting my hopes up for something that was going to happen or maybe was supposed to happen, and then it just wouldn't happen because of COVID, and it was just a cycle of being very stuck and being like down in the dumps. So I started kind of to realize, like, to appreciate what is given to us, not what can be given to us, you know, by kind of taking every day like as just a day, not really worrying about the future, I guess. Not like the way of like not worrying about it, but just taking everything that we need.
So you kind of took it more as like, here's a practical approach to help you overcome the challenges that you were facing over the last year?
Yeah. I think it's a way to just like simplify everything in your life if you're just kind of taking it as like, oh yeah, let's just play it by ear, I guess.
Do you consider yourself a Stoic?
I would say so. I would say it's more so, I would say it's really hard to just be a vigilant Stoic, like just like that all your life. I would say we can handle things stoically. I don't know if it's more of like a mindset that you're just in constantly or if it's like a situational kind of thing. That's a question I've been trying to answer, but I think it's more of a situational thing. I think it more depends on the situation at hand, and then you can handle something stoically or that kind of thing. Because I would say keeping your emotions in check isn't always the easiest thing in the world.
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, you say kind of situationally on that. I mean, is Stoicism a kind of a moment by moment thing, or is it more of like, oh, just this, here's this wooden, or maybe even just marble face that you put on everything?
I would say it's probably just more situational because it's, like I said, I think it's really hard to just be in this mindset your entire life. I mean, I would say while it is definitely doable, it's just it requires a lot of discipline, and that can sometimes falter in situations. So I would say it's more situational.
Okay. All right, shifting gears a little bit. Do you know what the two greatest commandments are in Scripture? All right, go for it. What are they?
Oh man, love God and love others.
Yeah. So love the Lord your God with all your heart, and then love your neighbor as yourself. How can Stoicism help a person's ability to better love God and better love others?
I guess I'll take it one step at a time. I would say it can help you learn to love others by appreciating them around you now, and it can also help you, like when you're trying to get through a situation, or maybe you can help somebody else get through a situation, you can show them like, hey, it's not all bad, correct, having an accurate perspective. And then I would say personally within loving God and yourself, I would say recognizing that God has given you a day, and like nothing that God does is wasted. Like every day that he gives you is meant for something. So I would say when you wake up in the morning, finding joy in just that you have a day, I mean, that's pretty great.
That's a good answer. All right, so here's the other side of that coin. Can Stoicism become an obstacle to loving God and loving others?
I would definitely say so. I wouldn't say true Stoicism because, like I said, you're practicing the virtue of like temperance and making sure that everything has its place, and it can definitely become an obsession, especially when it's just such an inward kind of philosophy. I would say it can become a distraction to not only the people around you but also God by only only analyzing the situation at hand and only thinking that is the only way, like kind of obsessing over the situations that are happening rather than just realizing them in the correct magnitude that they are, that it's like, okay, it's just a situation, it's just a thing. I mean, so yeah, that's how I would say that.
Okay, so true Stoicism is not a hindrance, but
I would say that it would also like help you because you're realizing what's around you and the beauty that, you know, God gives life and God gives us, and that we can share that with other people. And I would say that's just a really big moment for someone's walk with the Lord.
all right, thank you. I'm going to pass the mic to Mr. Acuff.
Very nice job, Jake.
Thank you.
That was awesome. So, I was going to ask some questions about Stoicism and faith, but I think you pretty much answered them already. So I'm going to ask you a different question that I think is very interesting and relevant to the thesis, where you talk about control over your emotions, right? You give the wonderful example of Macduff not suppressing his emotions. But what is having control over your emotions? Like, does it involve suppression or is it something else?
I would say it's more of resistance. I feel like whenever we're faced with challenges, we have this natural inclination. Like if I were to punch you in the face right now, I won't do it, I promise. You would have this just natural like feeling like, why did you do that? And you'd almost want to punch me back, which I also wouldn't want. You're a pretty big guy. But I would say it's more of having that emotion and analyzing it, not just being like, oh, well, I'll just let it slide. Kind of saying, okay, well, I'm angry right now, but I don't want to, just act on that emotion, because I don't think acting on emotions is ever truly a good thing. I guess we won't go there, but I would say it's more of a resistance towards your emotion, analyzing them, but also not acting fully upon them.
Okay. So it's not letting them sort of be expressed in reality.
Yeah, not letting them take over, I think I would say.
Okay. Is there ever a situation where it would be beneficial to suppress them, like to not shut it off?
I think in a situation, yeah, I would say, in certain situations, if it's a very quick kind of thing, you need to keep going. I would say it's okay to suppress them in the moment as long as they're brought up later and sort of handled with, because then I feel like that's sort of. I interviewed another person from my oral. I didn't mention him in my speech, but he talked a lot about trauma and how trauma is basically just kind of suppressed emotions that we just keep building on top of, and it's like a house when you have a foundation with something that's like a ripple in it, it affects the whole thing. So I would say as long as they're taken care of and handled in a later moment and they're still sort of relevant, I would say that, yeah, I could agree with that.
Again, it makes a lot of sense. Bottling up is very dangerous. A related question before I pass it on to Mr. Patterson. So you say that Stoicism involves sort of assessing your situation correctly. Could it be beneficial to not understand everything going on? Like, for instance, maybe secretly everyone dislikes me. It's better for my well-being to not know that. So,
I think that's more. That's a good question. I think we should fully analyze and realize that we're not being ignorant. I guess ignorance is bliss. I would say there's a certain aspect that comes in with us knowing ourselves, and if it's to our best inclination that we, excuse me, to our best inclination that we have the best possible understanding of a situation, and then we still don't understand, I feel like that's out of our control. So I guess to answer your question, yes, I guess it would be, again, situational, but yeah, I would say for the purpose of the question, yeah.
Cool. All right.
All right, Jake. All right.
Oh man.
Kidding. You did awesome. You did a really good job. I love watching you speak. Just the comfort that you have in front of a crowd is pretty impressive. So I have a couple of questions for you regarding this idea of current reality. Why does current reality matter?
Yeah, you just awoken. I would say analyzing something in a current reality is the purest way to understand a situation, so that way we can navigate through it. When we are faced with a situation that, say, we don't like, or maybe it's uncomfortable for us, we can almost lie to ourselves in a way and sort of make it seem, oh, it's okay, or we can even get down on ourselves and say it's the worst thing in the world. So truly analyzing something and having that kind of like I said with Mr. Acuff, like the best of our inclination, having something that we can, I guess, hang our hat on, knowing that we know everything about a situation is the best way to truly analyze it and come through it.
So how does it change things if we don't have a grasp of current reality? I mean, how do you fight against just living a life of just rainbows and butterflies all the time?
I would say that's definitely a temptation to be ignorant and just pretend everything is going to be okay. I would say the dangers of that would be like not knowing the situation and not knowing it fully, and then trying to just go at it as we can. So not being in the current reality of a situation is not beneficial because it doesn't set ourselves up for success to kind of push through it and get through the situation.
So how do you develop this idea of a current reality? I mean, how do you face your day and live in current reality? What is necessary? What is required?
I would say, for me personally, I think it's more of I analyze the extremes of both sides. So I feel like I would analyze, like, I guess in my oral, like, if I were like, okay, let's think of the worst possible thing I could do or say during my oral and go from there, and then think of like absolutely rocking it and killing it, and then I'm like, okay, with that in mind, I'm pretty sure I can, it's like you're all the way at the bottom here where you're like, I don't feel like I'm doing very well, this is a horrible thing, I hate it. Or you have like, I get out of this oral and I feel like I'm on top of the world. And I think somewhere in there I can shoot pretty close to the middle, or maybe even a little above. I mean, MCA is 85 is passing, so I feel like that's the golden standard. So I would say that's, for me at least, I think that another thing could be, it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of mental space to overanalyze situations as well as underanalyze them, because it's like you have this looming thing on your horizon. I mean, if I didn't study my oral until yesterday, I would be like, oh, it's fine. But then in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm going to have to get up there and still do it. And then on the other side of that, obsessing over it and like just obsessing over it and then letting it eat you up is also something that is also that can also be a danger. So that's why analyzing things in current reality would be very beneficial.
So you say that Stoics should strive to find their identity in Christ to help them stay in current reality, to help them move past circumstances that are unfavorable or disagreeable. How does your identity in Christ help you with your current reality?
I would say staying in current reality is something that it takes a lot of practice because, like I said, I mean, in the case of Stuart Scott, we'll just take him for example, it's like, I don't think when he lived his life he knew that he was going to get cancer and then, eventually his battle with cancer would end. But I think that maybe taking everything in current reality is a good thing because it helps us truly appreciate what we like about life. Like in the situation, and also in the situation of like getting retreat canceled. Yeah, retreat's awesome. It's super fun. You're at this cool campsite, but it's like what we truly like about it is having what we truly like about it is the people you spend it with, and that wasn't taken away at all. And that can be in terms of the walk in the terms of our walk with God, I'd say like taking every day as like a new opportunity, not just being like, oh, just another day kind of thing, but having like truly treating it as like a gift, I would say.
Could your own assessment of current reality, could it force you to go the other direction and not rainbows and butterflies, but just be Eeyore all the time?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say so. I would say, in fact, having a relationship with God is what keeps us from that. Because if we live like that, I mean, if we were to take, there's some philosophies that are whatever, just like, life sucks and then you die. And that is just, I think that's a horrible, horrible way to live. I mean, I think that our relationship with God allows us to appreciate every day as a gift and every day as a new opportunity to learn more, not only about God, but about people and the people around us. And we can have all these awesome experiences. And I would say not having a walk with God is a really dull way to go about life.
Yeah, I agree with you. And your phrase there, I think that's a different ism, not Stoicism. Life sucks and you die. That's not this one.
I reflect Nietzsche on that.
Yeah. One more question, and then I'm going to pass it back to Mr. Schumann. How you say that you got to keep your emotions in check and not let them control you. And I get that with the bad ones of anger and worry and fear. But can you ever have too much joy? Can you ever have too much love? Can you ever have too much kindness? I mean, are those emotions that you want to make sure you keep them in their place as well?
I would say also, I think that's a good question. I would say a lot of times emotions are like two ways. Like whether you're sharing it with something or say I get joy from doing something, I would say sort of not having like a, like not letting, short answer is like no, like I don't think you can ever have too much love in your life or joy. But I would say that can also lend ourselves to be a kind of almost oblivious in a way to sort of thing around them, going on to the rainbows and butterflies kind of thing. If that's the only thing you're basing your life off of, then I would say that is probably a problem.
Yeah. Oblivious, that's a good word. I agree with you. Thanks.
All right, we've got our virtual intermission. This is coming from online. So first question we have is from Legend. Assuming that's Legend Hoffman.
Nice.
Which mentor in your life influenced your decision to focus on Stoicism?
I would say a lot of the teachers at MCA employ a lot of Stoic ideas without kind of knowing they're teaching Stoicism. I mean, I feel like a lot of the examples I used in my speech were like MCA examples, like with the overcomer versus the victim, and then the freedom V. I know everything always comes back to the freedom V, but I would say seeing how that can, like how that affects their lives and how they teach and that kind of thing would probably be my biggest influence with having Stoicism, knowing that nothing's kind of granted and you have to kind of take every day as it goes. And I mean, they always teach on having your emotions in check. I mean, especially with sports, I would say like that's the biggest thing is you don't want to let your emotions override you, because then it's like you're giving the other team like something to hang their hat on, I guess. So yeah, I would probably say probably the teachers tutors at MCA would definitely be like my biggest example for that.
Okay, so this one's from Mr. Nelson, who as a student was probably the tutor that was the most like Jake when he was a student. He says, how does Stoicism relate to Aristotle's golden mean? If Stoicism is the virtue, what are the excess and deficiency?
I would say with Stoicism, it's the idea of keeping your emotions in check. So like earlier, I stated having no emotion, like being very vigilant and just having cavalier about everything and never analyzing that, and then having too much emotion. So that's an aspect of it. And then I would say with analyzing your current situation, the same sort of thing. You can almost be like numb, I guess, to kind of the world around you, because in regards to Stoicism, like you can be numb to like the situations around you, like, oh, nothing matters, kind of like Czier, like nothing matters, it's all going to end one day, And then on the excess of that, I would say the excess of Stoicism is probably exhausting, to say the least, I would say, because if you're just going to overanalyze every situation that's given to you, kind of taking everything with a grain of salt, I would say is a good way to say the excess and deficiency of Stoicism.
Okay. All right, so going back to that space that Legend brought us to, who are some contemporary Stoics in today's society?
What do you mean by contemporary?
People that are living today that are that everybody just kind of generally knows. Who are some celebrity Stoics maybe out there?
I guess I'll say one that I would say like The Rock is one of them, because I heard a story about him and it was like he wanted to play football really bad, and I feel like this is the case for a lot of celebrities, or I guess known celebrities, the ones we don't know, but like The Rock wanted to play football and he had like a full scholarship and everything. And I think Cole Miller in his oral last year talked about John Wayne doing the same kind of thing, where they wanted to pursue sports in their life and then they have an injury or something gets taken away, and then instead of just being down in the dumps, having this horrible situation, like kicking the dirt, kind of, well, that's my life over. I guess they instead decided to just pursue what they really wanted, and having the vigilance and the discipline to pursue a life like that, and I guess, make it to the top.
Okay. Are there any sports figures that you think embody Stoicism?
I mean, I would say you hear a lot of players overcoming injuries like that. For me, I think the biggest one that I've seen is Ryan Czier. He was on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he had a really nasty concussion a couple years earlier, and then like to the point where he was like one of the best linebackers in the game at the moment and at the time, and then he took this really bad hit, and instead of he had to walk away from football. But there's a really awesome video somewhere of him also walking up at the ESPYs and walking across the stage, and he's like, it was just gets this awesome standing ovation, and this is just this really, really empowering kind of thing of overcoming and not letting your battle kind of finish you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions that may push back a little bit on Stoicism. I'm just going to see what you'd say on this. So what's the catch to Stoicism? I mean, what's the cost of being a Stoic? What do you have to give up in life that's good in order to be a Stoic?
I guess as humans, we have a tendency to, when we feel down or when we feel upset about something, we sort of curl up in this ball and have that emotion and have it right there with us, and we're like, this is how I feel, this is how I'm like this. And I feel like that's very comforting in a way, to be overcome with your emotions. Not in a good way, of course, but I would say, I guess that's the catch, is you don't get that kind of, let's just be down in the dumps and be a victim of our circumstances, because that's also an easy mindset to fall in. So I don't really see that as a catch, but I would say that's something that you definitely would have to give up.
What would you say to somebody who said Stoicism is just the philosophy of apathy, or that Stoicism makes people not care about caring?
I would say it's impossible to not care about something, or if you don't care about something, it's impossible to like give any attention to it. So if you didn't care about your life, you wouldn't pursue what's best for you. You wouldn't try to advance. You wouldn't try to get anywhere. If you just become apathetic, you're just, like I said earlier, being a victim of your circumstances, and that's the only thing you'll ever be, is a victim of your circumstances.
Okay, and then another question kind of in that same vein. What would you say to Stephen King, who once wrote, "All stoicism and no play makes Jake a very dull boy"?
What would I say to him?
Yeah, what would you say to Stephen King?
I'd probably ask him for an autograph first. I would say, again, like having the idea of true stoicism with temperance, putting everything in its place, giving everything the right amount of magnitude, and giving everything the right amount of attention to detail would be something. Like having the golden mean, like Mr. Nelson talked about earlier, finding the balance between both of those things and harnessing that to, get where you want to go.
I really appreciate the way you're going back to your definitions and not what other people are framing the definition of stoicism as. So you're not taking the bait. All right, so my last question for you is stoicism a prerequisite or a requirement for Christian faithfulness?
Prerequisite or requirement?
Like, do you have to, obviously most people don't know the word stoicism or follow it until today, but do you have to, in essence, live out the principles of stoicism if you're going to be a faithful Christian? Or can you be a faithful Christian and ignore the principles of stoicism?
I would say you have to have some aspects of stoicism. And I think like a modern problem with this today is people are stoics, but they don't know it. People keep their emotions in check, and they truly analyze situations, and they don't get in they aren't in the victim circle, and they don't become products of their surroundings. So I would say that is an aspect that I would say is very very needed for a walk with God. And so yes, I would say that it is definitely either a prerequisite or a requirement.
Okay. Yeah, the fruit of the Spirit is self-control.
Yeah.
So you said that everything goes back to the freedom of the everything else goes back to the cave, right?
Of course.
So are they the same? You're not going to start if you want to. But.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was not paying attention to the question. I was pouring some water. I'm sorry.
So are they the same? The freedom bee and the cave.
Ooh, man, I'm getting like great books too. Like in the class, something just says something. I would say the cave is with the freedom V. I'd say it's like you're in the cave and you're. I guess for my purposes, I would say you're a product of your circumstances in the cave. And then when you go out of the cave, it's a lot of freedom. And I would say you sort of go from the bottom of the freedom V just to the very top, like that. And so that's why it's very hard to find that middle ground. Because I feel like when you would first come out of the cave and see the sun, it's blinding, like literally, like blinding, like you can't see. And so that's sort of like being at the top of the freedom V.
Too quickly.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say that's how I would relate those two.
Cool. So, on a related note, right? Let's say I'm a 7th or 8th grader, and I've been struggling in MCA this year. And I listen to this, and I want to be a Stoic now. And I feel really good about it. And then I wake up tomorrow morning, and it's like I'm nothing like a Stoic. So how do I take some steps to become a Stoic and overcome it?
I guess I would say take steps. I would say try to analyze your situations, because I feel like as a 7th or 8th grader, again, at the bottom of the freedom V, you don't feel like you have a lot of control over your life, I guess. You kind of just, your parents are telling you to do this, teachers are telling you to do this. So I would say, and every time those situations happen, like, think about, like, what do I want to do? And what would be good for me to pursue Stoicism with the restraint of the freedom V that I'm in this moment? And I would say I would say, like, it's never too late to, like, try to better yourself. Like, don't be apathetic. I know, like, my 7th or 8th grade year, I was, like, got to the end of the year and I was like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. So I would say, treating every day as if it were, like, a gift and trying to find the best, like, way to enjoy that. I think so.
Cool. So, since you're going into theater, and a lot of the roles that you'll probably end up in are going to be, like hyper emotional, like over dramatic, right, for the stage. And you are trying to apply Christian Stoicism to your life. How do you prevent sort of like the habits of one world from bleeding into the other?
I would say, in like a smaller, under like a microscope with Stoicism, like I would say all performing is you have a moment. And it's what you choose to do in that moment, and it gets to the point where it's almost instinctual. And so once that moment is come and gone, it's like, okay, cool, that was fun. And then it's just a lot of those moments together make a show, I guess, or a performance. So I would say not letting them bleed into the other, not letting one bleed into the other is, you can use it as an example. Like when you're in a performance or something like that, you can look and say, wow, I'm acting really hyper emotional. This is how I don't want to act in my normal day-to-day life. So that's how you can kind of get the excess of it, and then, of course, getting into the deficiency of it would be like you express so much emotion in a certain role or in a certain performance like that you have nothing left for yourself. And I would say you need to like harness how you would handle that situation or those moments, and not let them like realize that there's like a fine line between them. So, yeah.
Cool. So, let's see. Are there other ways that Stoicism can be used in things like, business or sports?
I would say definitely in sports. In sports, I would say overcoming your emotion is like the most important thing in sports. Especially a lot of times, some things are actually out of your control. Like with, I guess, umpires or refs or something like that, it's very hard. If a call is made and it isn't very good, it's very easy to play the victim and be like, why? This is horrible. Why did you make that call? Why did you do that? So definitely in sports and being in control of your emotions. And then another thing that I know like our baseball team has experienced this year, we like to do everything the hard way, Mr. Patterson said earlier, but knowing that you're never out of it and knowing like the situation at hand, it's like anything truly can happen. You can give up 6 runs in the first 2 innings and then come back and win. and that's just an awesome thing. And I would say once you've done that once, it makes all the other situations so much easier. Like being like, okay, well, we're down 6-7 runs, we're down 15 points, we can come back. We've done it before. It's happened before. I guess in the business world, let's say again, treating everything like, I would say not having a lot of emotions, because again, a lot of things are out of your control. I mean, in business, I would say it's like you're trying to sometimes like persuade, like persuasion is used a lot of the time. I guess knowing that some things are like just truly out of your control, like you can't control that. Like in the parable that was discussed earlier, like with the wind, like you just have to harness the wind to get to your destination. You can't control the wind. And again, you can't just let the wind like blow you around and you'll just drift away. So yeah, I guess that's how I would answer that.
Cool. So is there a way, or since in which like practicing Stoicism makes it easier in the long term? Like it kind of gets easier as it goes on?
What gets easier? Like just
Stoicism, having the Stoic mindset.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say it's like learning to do anything else. When you pick it up for the first time, it can be difficult, it's uncomfortable, and you might not like it at first. But it's when you stick with it and you kind of, when you stick with it, you begin to see like the true beauty of it and how it can help you. Like with baseball, you take a ground ball to the nose and it doesn't hurt. I mean, it doesn't feel very good. It hurts a lot. And in that moment, you could throw your glove on the ground and just say, oh, I don't want to play anymore. This sucks. But if you were to do that in that moment, you'd never be able to experience things like hitting walk-offs or getting things like that. So I would say when you first do it, yes, it can be uncomfortable. But if you persevere with it and you stick with it, you begin to see, I guess, the fruits of your labor.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's definitely something that's worth practicing as much as you possibly can. So, one more question that interests me as a person who studies psychology, and you brought it up earlier with the trauma. I kind of alluded to it. For someone who's struggling with a problem like depression or anxiety, who's already coming from a state of, they don't have as much emotional control as they normally would, how can they use Stoicism in their lives, in that kind of situation?
I would say if you're suffering from something like depression or anxiety, the only person who can truly evaluate your situation and what's best for you is yourself. So you can have people give you suggestions and things like that, but at the end of the day, it's what your mental capacity can take and what you can do. I would say, and again, with mental illnesses like that, it's very hard to have the mental strain to kind of control your emotions. It's definitely harder to be a Stoic or exemplify Stoic tendencies with a mental illness like that. I would just say, again, trying to really celebrate the good things that happen in your life, even something small, like you order something, like you order something somewhere and they give you free food. It's a very small thing, but the idea of celebrating that, treating that as like a true win, can help. And then again, on the other side, I guess, when you have like a misfortunate situation or a situation that's less than ideal, taking that with a grain of salt as well. Like, yes, you want to be upset about it, and it's natural and it's almost healthy to be upset in that moment. But then just let it be that moment. Don't let it carry over. Don't let it ruin your day. Don't let it ruin your week or month or life or something like that, especially for something small. And again, it's situational, so it would depend on, I guess, how long it takes you to weather that storm or enjoy it. So
it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is, change your focus as much as you can and focus on the good things as well, and kind of let the bad things go. Don't hold on to them.
Yeah, I would say let them go, but analyze them. Take it easy, but take it. Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
So you tell us that a Stoic will take a more inward approach.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guard against relying on yourself too much?
When you're trying to take an inward approach, how do you rely? Sorry, can you repeat the question?
you say to the Stoic when they encounter problems or when they have difficulties that rather than being overcome with their emotions and kind of losing rational thought, they're going to take an inward approach. And then you go through and explain the virtues from Plato. How do you guard against just making it about, well, I have to take care of this myself and I'm going to overcome this on my own?
I would say we need God around us to truly analyze what we like about or what we love about life. Like, that's something, yes, you can find it on your own to a certain extent, but unless you have, I guess, God in your life, it's really hard to truly know and truly like put your faith and stock into something that is always going to be there. Because taking a more inward approach like that is very taxing. If you're just constantly, every time you're faced with a situation, just getting in this cycle of truly just trying to analyze it and overanalyze it and figure out what's the worst thing and what's the best thing. And even if you're using the virtues like that, it can be mentally like straining to have that like weight on you every time you're faced with a situation.
So you use the very famous scripture from James where it says, "Consider it joy when you experience the trials." Do you have any other scriptures that you could share? Like Mr. Acuff said, there's maybe some future Stoics that are trying to figure out how to do this.
I mean, not off the top of my head right now, but I mean, I would say a lot of like what Jesus teaches is to love everything, and I feel like love and joy also go hand in hand. Those two things I feel like are very, very close to each other, because I feel like you're exerting the same amount of passion, just maybe in a little bit of a different way. So I would say having those two things are essential to not just having an inward approach and taking everything like that.
All right, shift gears a little bit. I want to press into theater a little bit with you. You and I are a lot alike. We both love baseball. We both love performing. You as an actor on the stage, me as the musician playing the music for you on the stage. Can your Stoicism, your idea of keeping everything in moderation, can that help you in your theater?
I would say yeah, because a lot of times in theater, it's the difference in emotion that truly show a character. Like if you're just flat the whole time and you're not exerting any emotion and you're just like that, like that's not a fun character to watch, it's not a fun character to play. The contrast in the different types of emotion and how you react more sensitively to this kind of thing as opposed to the other thing, that's kind of how I would say like, that's how that would carry over.
So do you ever have any role that's because we're going to, temperance is keeping everything in moderation and controlling our emotions. Do you ever have a role that you're looking at it that you're like, oh, I have to have that role. I really want that role. How can you be a Stoic and trying to keep everything and then go, and then what happens if I don't get that role?
I would say with theater explicitly, it's very much about like looks and how things look. You know, it's like you can be the best actor, singer, dancer, performer in the room, but if you have blonde hair and they're looking for someone with black hair, tough luck. So that's kind of another thing I would say with Stoicism and theater. It's knowing that that's sort of out of your control. I can't control what role I get. I can only control like I get up there and do my best and do how I think I should do it. And if somebody else agrees with you, they say yes, I agree. That's how you should do it. Something more like a directorial role, then that's kind of how that would carry over.
So as long as you kind of have this current reality and kind of a good grasp of your own identity and who you are, then you're able. Is that how you're saying? Is that how you're able to kind of take this and say, well, it wasn't meant to be. That wasn't supposed to be my role.
Yeah, I would say that it's a lot also about like confidence. Like if like for instance, like if I were to go into like an audition or something and I know like I just completely botched it, like then it's like, okay, well, that's a little bit of my fault. But it's like if I go in there and I truly think like I did the best that I could, I did everything that I was supposed to do, I did it to the best of my ability, then I can have that chip on my shoulder, I guess, of knowing like, well, I kind of put everything on the table. That's how That's how I would say. And then again, like not if say like you don't get the role or you don't get that thing in your life, like making time for it. Like yes, be upset about it for like a day or two, and then be like, okay, congratulations to the person who did get it, or realizing like maybe it wasn't the best thing for me. Like I know, like this is kind of an interesting story. When I was in my freshman year, the first year I started to play baseball, I went up for a role. And I was like, man, I got it in the bag. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is, you know who I am? Like, come on, like, get out of here. And it was, the choice for me was either going to be like, I would get this role and I would pursue this with this show for 2 or 3 months, or I would play baseball. And so I didn't end up getting the role. Like, yes, I was incredibly upset about it, but it opened me up to play baseball. And now that's like a huge part of my life. So I would say, even in the bad situations, we don't know like what's going to happen, like who's to say kind of thing. So yeah, I would say that even in like bad situations like that, we can open ourselves and lend ourselves to more opportunities to grow.
Well, I love how you say the word grow. Before I give you the mic and you get to grill us, I wanted to tell you I have enjoyed so much watching you grow over the last several years. I mean, I've been here as a tutor for 3, but just watching you talk about that baseball as a freshman, and I just remember the first practice, and my first thought was, oh my. And just, I think that you've been a Stoic longer than you think you have been in terms of that, because your attitude and your effort that you've put in on the baseball field has just been incredible. We say that a lot of baseball, right? It's your attitude and your effort. Control the controllables. Maybe we're all Stoics out there at the baseball field. I don't know. We just didn't know it. But you have put in the work, and you've had a great attitude about it, and you've controlled what you can control, and now as a senior you're really starting to reap the benefits and reap the rewards of that hard work. And so I mean, on a personal note, it's been awesome to watch you grow, and not just on the baseball field, just as a young man. So I appreciate being able to sit and visit with you this morning. So
Thank you.
I think now it's our turn to have you.
Oh man, here we go. I guess on the same note as my oral, like with Stoicism, what's an event in your life where something has happened and you have sort of been overcome with emotion? And have you ever had an instance where you've been overcome with emotion and it kind of like you've started, like you realized that you were being like in that moment? Like, I guess I want to know like what that moment was, like where you checked yourself and you're like, what am I doing? Like, why am I like this? And then I have a follow-up question after we're done with this question.
So your question is, what's a moment that we've realized that we're about to lose it emotionally?
Yeah, over something that in the moment that when you had that self-check, you were like, why am I getting mad over this?
Okay. All right, this isn't necessarily a moment, but it's a scenario I found myself in. One of the most important things I learned in college was when you step on a volleyball court, like just a pickup game of volleyball, you have to realize what type of game is being played. Is this a game that's just for poots and giggles and we're just going to hit the ball around and all laugh at everything, or is this serious? Because if you're the serious guy, come on, get it, then you're going to come off as a jerk. And if you're the person that's just, ha ha ha, this is funny, while everybody else is serious, then you're in a lot of trouble. And so it probably was being on the wrong side of that, where I'm too intense playing sports, and it's like, wait a second, I need to chill. There's no gold medals that are going to be handed out today. We're just having fun with friends and just kind of letting it go there.
So mine was probably in freshman year in college. I took an upper level chemistry class that I did not need to be in, and was this close to just dropping out of college altogether because of it. Because I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't like making any friends, I was too busy, and so realizing like would I just throw away everything because I'm so frustrated with this one class, and not being where I am today. That was probably a moment that most of you will experience at some point, in the sense of just like this class is overwhelming, right? Yeah, that's definitely a time to take a check, which you actually experience with MCA too.
Yeah, exactly.
This class is very tough.
That Algebra 1 class with Mr. Nelson was pretty rough too. I definitely question my future attendance to MCA based on that.
So that's what comes to mind.
For me, I could go either music or sports. I may or may not have been that coach that like yelled at the bad call a few times. And by the way, it was not getting 6 runs behind. We get 7 runs.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me.
So we want to make sure we keep that right. For me, it really, when I started to kind of realize that there was more, a greater goal in things, was I was teaching band, and band directors are a lot like coaches. It's just they're severely driven on the perfection of the performance, and if we don't do the perfect performance, then it's a failure. We've had a terrible year, and so whenever I read a book, ironically, by John Wooden, a basketball coach, and his definition of success is the peace of mind that comes with knowing that you did your best, and then you have to dig into, okay, what does that mean to do our best? And I was always driven and always frustrated because my band never seemed to be as good as I wanted it to be, and so I was always given this idea or this mentality that, well, nothing's ever good enough for Mr. Patterson. And we had a performance one time for a contest that I thought was a lot better than the results that the judges thought it was. I mean, obviously, it's like the bad call. The umpire's always wrong, coach is always right. The judges are always wrong, the director's always right. And so we ended up not getting the rating that I felt like we deserved. And I was just really mad, and I was just really, really just down in the dumps, to use your phrase. And I came home from school, and the kids were really little, and I walked through the door, and I was just really just mad. And Joshua came running towards me, and I mean, I'm talking like little bitty, comes running towards me, and I don't know, it's like children I guess are more intuitive than we give them credit for sometimes. And he just kind of knew something was wrong. He goes, "What's wrong, Daddy?" I was like, Daddy's band didn't do very good today. And he just kind of stopped, and he goes, "It's okay, I still love you." Gave me a big hug and ran off. And it was just like, but I mean, coupled that with this idea of John Wooden's success is just the peace of mind of doing your best. And it really just started to transform the way that I approach things. And ironically, it also transformed the performances of my band. I mean, when I stopped driving for perfection and just started pursuing the excellence and doing the very best that we could, we got better. And our performances were cleaner, and everything just kind of seemed to be kind of falling into place, because it was like, why am I so mad over 3 people's opinions when I felt like we did well? Why can't I just go with that and just let it be?
Yeah, good answer. Now, my final question: if anybody knows Mr. Schumann, you know that he is a big prankster. He's a big prank guy. So I want to know either the best prank or just a prank that you've done in your life that you've been really proud of. For asking for a friend.
Oh man, that's a blast from the past. Favorite prank that I ever did was a group prank at T-Bar M. The cabins are all cookie cutter size and the same size, and so me and the other leadership guys one night at the end of camp, that was strategic, so that way we didn't have time to get retaliation. Pre-sunk some screws into some boards, and then in the middle of the night went and then basically locked in the girls' leadership cabin in the middle of the night. And then they thought that was over, and then we went and then set up the camp sound speakers and just kind of put the speakers on either side of the window, and then played "I'm Blue" on repeat. And so,
that's much fun.
That was a lot of fun. And then I want to give you just one last parting shot before Mr. Patterson closes in prayer. I think you've learned Stoicism over the years because you've been an O's fan.
It's very hard to get off. Man, that cuts deep.
Hey, as a Rangers fan, I feel you. We've only had like a couple years.
That's probably the only thing that's worse than being an Orioles fan.
I'm glad you said that at the end. So again, Jake, it's been a pleasure just watching you grow. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this. I think I can speak for these guys. We've enjoyed it. So let's pray and we'll close for today. Father, we just come to you right now. We just express our gratitude and our thanks for Jake. God, I thank you personally for just the joy that he brings every day, just the joy that he brings in our lives, in my life, and how he just exudes happiness. And I just thank you for that, Lord. I lift him up to you, God, as he crosses this threshold of high school graduation and begins to move forward in his life. God, I pray that you will just be with him. God, I pray that you'll help him to remain rooted and established in the faith that he's been taught, so that this idea of Stoicism can be rooted and established in a reliance upon you and holding hands with you as he walks through his trials and stays in that current reality because of his identity that he has through Christ. God, we just thank you for just this entire event. We thank you for his presentation today. And God, we just thank you for Jesus, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen.